Hello and welcome to Planet Holyrood. I'm Paul Hutcheon, political editor of the Daily Record, joined this week by Sunday Mail editor John Ferguson and Scottish Daily Express's Douglas Dickie. So, a lot to talk about. We're going to discuss Andy Burnham, basically about to become Prime Minister, the latest allegations surrounding Yes Scotland, which the Sunday Mail has led the way on. Obviously, the appalling killing of former MP Anne Widdecombe. So, talk about football first, though, just before we come to Burnham. We're recording this on Wednesday afternoon, a few hours before the England-Argentina semi-final. John, is the Prime Minister, the outgoing Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, right? Should Scots be supporting England?
Well, I mean, I think in this one you've really got to just follow your heart.
Where's your heart?
I mean, I've kind of lost interest in the World Cup since Scotland went out, so I'm not really supporting anyone anymore.
My line is the only team I support in international football is Scotland.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, listen, what I do think is that if you don't want to support England, then I don't think you need to feel bad about that. They're our oldest rival. They don't really support us. They only say they support us because they're better than us. If there was even a modicum of chance that you were going to beat them in the World Cup and better them consistently, then they wouldn't be supporting us. So don't feel bad about not supporting England. But equally, if you want to support England, go right ahead.
Doug?
I think going out and buying the flag of every country England are playing on the way up to the semi-finals is really sad and pathetic.
Attention seeking.
I also think, Scots, I don't really know if England are our rivals anymore at international level.
In our own minds they are.
Yeah.
They don't see us as
rivals. It's certainly not. And obviously there's...
But our neighbours and neighbours are always rivals to some degree.
Obviously this game's got a bit more spice about it because of the history between the two teams, and obviously the Falklands War gets brought up. I've seen a few arguments that football's obviously not war. Jordan Pickford said that. What I would say is, what people in Scotland don't seem to realise is it's the Argentinians who make this game about the Falklands. It's not actually England fans.
Well, I did see John Simpson, the
BBC's
claiming that this is going to set the tone for the next 10 years of international relations between England and the UK and Argentina, which I felt a bit like overkill.
But I'm going to I'm a bit cold on international football. I'm looking forward to the proper stuff getting started in a few weeks.
I'm increasingly cold on it as well. You see these clips on social media where fans are asked, do you want your team to win the league or your country to win the World Cup? And 9 times out of 10, they all say they want their club to win.
Yeah, I very much consider myself in that group. The one thing I would say is, I was saying this to Paul before we came on air, but there is a wee bit of me, the absolute seethe it would cause if England won the World Cup might be worth it, because people on social media would just erupt, and I think it would be absolutely hilarious in some ways. I think the real fans won't care, and I think this is just a kind of invented... People are talking about it. Andrew Neil referring to England as we, a bit weird. I do think that's a bit weird, but support who you want tonight, whether it's Argentina or England.
As a country, I love England. It's people, towns, cities, but when it comes to the men's national football team, I just
the men's?
Just the men's, yeah.
So when the Lionesses playing?
Yeah, no, I would support the Lionesses. There's something...
Why is that? That's quite an interesting...
Just petty geographical rivalry.
But why just the men then? Why doesn't that extend to the women?
Something gets my goat when it comes to the male football team. I don't know what it is.
And yet they're probably...
less so now than, say, the 90s. I mean, if you look at their players, they are quite a likeable bunch.
Well, fair enough, I'm kind of the opposite, because in the 90s they had a really strong Rangers contingent. So I was kind of, when Paul Gascoigne was playing at 96 and he was one of the best players there, I was buzzing for him, and I wanted England to win it because Paul Gascoigne was playing for him.
It's difficult not to like Harry Kane. I think he seems like a thoroughly decent chap, doesn't he? I think we're in this strange position in the UK in that we have this media that's bound up together, so there isn't many examples of other countries where they'll be watching a game that's not their national team, but they'll be listening to a commentary that is hugely.
I think it's especially pronounced here because England are so much better than Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, or historically. But if you
It
remember,
can be quite annoying, can't it?
well, exactly. But in 2016, the media down south were every bit as gushing about Wales. And this year, I've heard the complaints that, I'm watching Argentina versus Cape Verde, and they've got a report from the England camp. But when Scotland were still in the competition, every game, no matter who you're watching, had a report from the Scotland camp as well. It's just because England are going deep in the tournament that it becomes such a big issue.
Right, let's move on to politics. The next time we record this podcast, Andy Burnham will be in Downing Street as Prime Minister, barring a complete and utter disaster. So I think the sequencing is that on Friday he'll be crowned as the leader of the Labour Party, and then Monday he'll go and see the King, and he'll become the Prime Minister. Westminster will be in recess, so there won't be any sort of set-piece debate or PMQs or anything like that. Alex Widdecombe of Bloomberg seemed to get a pretty comprehensive briefing from the side of the government on the challenges facing Andy Burnham on his first day. I'll just read out the tweet. Andy Burnham will be told by senior civil servants on Monday that he faces a worsening economy, rising borrowing costs and interest rates hikes in his first 6 months as PM. He'll also be warned that there could be an oil price shock if the Iran war escalates and new pressure from Donald Trump to provide UK military support. Quite a tricky opening.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of sounds a bit like a formal version of the "there's no money left" note that the incoming Tory government found. I think up until now, Andy Burnham has been very much engaging with his inevitable entry to number 10 on his terms. He's not really been doing the tough interviews. He's been talking about the subject.
Which is disappointing.
Yeah, but he can't really maintain that, can he? He's up until now he's been talking about the things he wants to talk about. That's mostly been around this idea of rewiring Britain, constitutional stuff, federalism. He's not going to be able to continue to talk about these topics without answering questions on the really difficult stuff, which is going to be around the economy, around international stuff, Israel, Gaza. Is he in favour of a wealth tax? Is he really going to be able to nationalise public utilities like he would like to do anytime soon? We mentioned Andrew Neil earlier. The last time he ran to be Labour leader, he was on Andrew Neil's show, and Andrew Neil was giving a bit of a hard time, and there's some footage of him saying, "When I become Labour leader, you'll get the first interview." Andrew Neil's now been saying, "Right, great, let's hope that's not the first broken promise," and I wouldn't be surprised if it is. So he's, in some ways, it's inexplicable the extent to which Keir Starmer has been unpopular as a Labour Prime Minister, and a lot of people put that down to just presentational stuff. So let's give Andy Burnham a chance. If as seems likely that you're not going to have an incredibly radical new policy agenda, and actually what you're going to get is someone who thinks that he can sell basically centrist Labour policies to the public better, then let's give him a chance to do that. Let's see what small things that he can come up with around the edges that potentially are going to make people feel better about their future and their lives. Let's see if we can kind of connect with people a bit better. And, who knows, maybe this could be a turning point for Labour, but I think it's going to be very tough.
I mean, I think that it's crucial he gets a good start, because Starmer had a terrible start. Came in, people wanted to turn the corner on 14 years of Tory rule, whatever it was, and then we got the same sort of doom and gloom, and then it was like blaming the Tories for leaving behind a mess, rather than a sort of positive, hopeful, upbeat vision. I think Burnham needs something the first week. Remember when Blair got in, I think it was Gordon Brown who made the Bank of England independent. Something like that, just to show that things have changed, rather than Burnham being a continuity Prime Minister.
Yeah, he needs something big, doesn't he? I think he needs to come in, be positive. Don't make your first move to take money off of pensioners.
Give money to people.
Give perhaps something around. I know that a lot of tax experts think that rather than a wealth tax, some kind of land value tax could be the way to really increase the tax take on people with the broadest shoulders in order to give some breaks to people less fortunate. Something like that, something big that will establish him as his own man, and some policies that people really feel, well, yeah, this is our guy. He's on our side, not on the side of whoever, big business, the banks. I think that's what he needs to do in the first few weeks.
Doug, I read out the Alex Widdecombe tweet. The Burnham vibes are quite good just now, but on Monday he's going to be hit with reality. I mean, are you optimistic that it's going to be a successful premiership?
I mean, I think he certainly presents himself better than Keir Starmer, who always came across quite a cold individual. I think never really connected with the public. But we've spoken this show before about how it may be events elsewhere that determine how we remember Andy Burnham in 20 years' time. I mean, you said yourself in that tweet, the situation in Iran is going to have a massive bearing on how people view Andy Burnham in that early period, because it doesn't matter if it's not his fault. If people see their bills going up, the petrol prices going up, people are going to take that out on the government of the day, and that's how, in many ways, PMs are kind of slaves to fortune elsewhere. And it's
like you come in thinking this is what I want to focus on,
but then
and then
Donald Trump bombs Tehran, and everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Mike Tyson, I think, said that.
It's a great shame for Andy Burnham that the peace deal in the Middle East didn't hold, because if it had and energy prices were seen to be coming down, the UK economy was actually looking good. There was some green shoots over the last few months. Inflation didn't look like it was going to be as bad as it was. Great shame if a return to war scuppers a bounce back for the UK economy, because I think that's the biggest reason that you would have for feeling very optimistic about his prospects.
But of course, people would say, well, Burnham's then got a part to play in trying to bring about that peace. But I don't really know if anyone can control Donald Trump. No one can certainly control Iran.
I don't think his own government can really control what Donald Trump's going to tweet each morning.
But ultimately, and again, I'm banging this drum, it's how people feel better off. When you go to the shops, are you feeling as though you're getting more for your pound? That will determine whether Andy Burnham is successful, and everything else around it kind of falls into place if you can solve that problem. If you can make people feel better about themselves, feel better about their lives, that's what's going to determine Andy Burnham's premiership.
I think what he's got in his favour is that he becomes Prime Minister, and then there is this recess, which means he can focus on the public, doesn't have to worry about what's going on at Westminster, preparing for PMQs. He can be laser-like focused on the voters.
I mean, there is another argument to suggest that we're a bit of a new PM and he's not going to be under any parliamentary scrutiny for a few months, but that's the system.
Bad for us, but probably good for him.
What he is going to have to do is appoint a cabinet.
Yeah,
it's going to be very interesting.
I mean,
indicators.
I mean, you're saying that spending time preparing for PMQ. Do we put too much emphasis on stuff like PMQs? It's just pantomime, really, and ultimately it doesn't matter how.
But if you fall flat on your face,
I know.
It creates this momentum with failure.
It's momentum and it's perspective. But ultimately, if people go to shops and their shopping no longer costs an arm and a leg, they're not really going to care if you don't hold your own against Kemi Badenoch. Kemi Badenoch has grown into her role as opposition leader, I think. She's not going to give Burnham an easy time. She gave Keir Starmer a really tough time in this last kind of year. It took her a while, I think, to grow into it. So Burnham's not going to get an easy ride. So from his point of view, it's definitely a bonus that he can kind of settle into the job before he actually has to go and do
he will also benefit
Westminster
from what looks like a very bad period coming up for Nigel Farage. The rise of reform was one of the main thorns in the side of Keir Starmer. It does, it's early days, but it kind of feels like Farage is going to be done by this current scandal around bungs and
the by-election.
Do you think Count Binface might be in his cabinet?
Who knows?
I just wonder as well, you're right about reform, and they're not finished. Clearly, they've got a great chance of winning the next general election. But if Burnham does get a summer bounce, say Labour get up to like 30% in the polls and Reform are down at like 20, 21, with the Tories on 20. I know that Burnham has ruled out an early general election, but he might just well conclude this is as good as it's going to get. I'm just going to go for it. And then gets his own mandate. He's no longer shackled to a manifesto that he didn't write, he probably doesn't believe in. Gets his own 5-year term in the knowledge that things will go south for him pretty quickly.
There's going to be a moment for him.
Yeah.
Where he's going to need to make a big
seen what
decision.
happened to Theresa May in 2017.
It was risky for Gordon Brown as well in 2007, and he made the wrong call. So I think people can forgive politicians for saying there isn't going to be a general election, and then 6 months later there is.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's something that they would be bitter about.
I don't know, can people be bothered with another?
I don't think they can ever be bothered.
No, true. I mean, up here, obviously, that would have a major ramifications up here, because you would imagine that the SNP would stage some sort of
Scottish
comeback.
Labour might be the resistors of an early general election.
Then again, branch form, all this stuff that came out after the Scottish election, would that have an impact on it? So,
to be honest, I think that people quite like elections. People don't want it. I think in general, people quite engaged with politics, and an election gives them an opportunity to take part, and by and large they quite like it.
There's so many of them. they come around even more often than a World Cup now.
You would imagine, though, if there was this Burnham bounce, and as I say, if it got up to 30%, that would improve Scottish Labour's poll rating as well. Not enough for them to hold on to all their seats, but maybe half their seats.
Well, I mean, it'd be risky up here. I could see Scottish Labour wouldn't be particularly happy with it. I don't know why Andy would give up such a huge majority. I get the kind of reasoning behind it, but it's such a risk, because you run the risk that you have a really bad campaign, and they would even at 30% they would win it, but would they have the sort of majority they command now? Would they even have a majority? It's such a risky game.
Might lose if they wait 5 years or 3 years.
True. But at least then you've got 3 years to build your case, as opposed to 6 months. But again, it's probably going to be events halfway across the world that should determine how.
I guess it depends whether you think this is the high point. This is the time to make a case, or whether your case might fall apart over the next 3 years. You wait.
There's always, if England do go all the way in the World Cup, he comes in the next day.
Exactly.
As he kind of...
You can just see the poll rating.
Yeah. Oh, everything's not too bad. Well, down south will think that.
Cool Britannia will be back.
And one of the areas that he is going to make progress on is devolution, and this idea of taking power away from Whitehall and Westminster and giving it to the nations and regions. Now, I can see how that works for England, particularly the north of England. More mayors, more funding for local communities. I can see how it works for Wales, given that the Welsh Assembly doesn't have the same powers as the Scottish Parliament. But right now I'm struggling to see how that actually applies to Scotland, because we've got one of the most devolved parliaments in the world. If he's talking about giving more power to councils, then that is a matter for the Scottish Parliament. It's not for Westminster. So, to enforce mayors in Scotland would be it'd be trampling over the devolution settlement. I'm just scratching my head as to how does a devolution agenda work?
Yeah, I mean, I find it difficult to... At the moment, Scotland, you've essentially got 3 governments. You've got UK government, Scottish government, local government. Do people want another layer of government? People want 4 governments.
I mean, I assume that a mayor would fit into the local government system.
Yeah, but it's another thing that you vote for another. So, do people really want it? Do they get that? And I can kind of understand it more in England, that it looks like Metro mayors have been quite successful in big cities, and they don't have, obviously, a Scottish Parliament or anything like it. It's difficult to see that. I mean, do you think that he's even really going to go for that, setting up the structure, having a fight with the Scottish government over setting up elections and appointing mayors in Edinburgh and Glasgow.
I just can't see it.
It feels like a
I imagine his tactics would be
would be
more
a
to
strange priority.
would be to do it down south, and if it's successful, then continually bang the drum. Well, why aren't you doing it up in Scotland rather than impose it? Try and put the pressure on the SNP government to kind of do it. I was interested. I don't know if you read the piece by Pete Wishart in the National about federal, a federal UK. He's called for an English Parliament. They're obviously against these kind of devolving to the English regions because you think it puts Scotland, a historic country, on par with Yorkshire. But he's suggested an English Parliament and then a central Westminster, I assume, to kind of oversee defence and matters of interest across the whole.
I'm sure Andy Burnham will treat that proposal with the
it's
respect
just-
it deserves.
I think it's a bit, is that a sign of from what's kind of coming for the SNP? It's another federalist party now? Or
Feels to me that if you're like there's this sort of new Rewires UK that Andy Burnham's talked about, or one side of it is getting rid of the House of Lords or scaling back the House of Lords, voting reform in terms of introducing some element of PR into voting, and then there's the continued devolution. I think if I was advising him, I would maybe say the thing that will go down well with the public would be the House of Lords stuff. Potentially I don't know, potentially some form of PR in general elections. I think the getting involved in appointing mayors sort of feels like something that you would be doing if you were outside of. It seems like a good idea when you're outside of government. When you're in government, that's just giving power away to someone else.
Yeah, but one thing I don't think devolution means in the Scottish context is more powers for the Scottish Parliament. I just can't imagine the circumstances in which Labour ministers give away power that they currently exercise to SNP ministers.
Yeah.
I mean, two things I guess he could do would be to maybe take some of the money that goes to the Scottish Parliament in the form of the block grant, give it directly to councils, to top slice it. Obviously would be controversial, but he could easily argue that that is devolution in practice. It can maybe like devolve reserve powers and give them to councils as well, rather than the Holyrood. So there's two options there in the margins, I think.
Another thing you can do is I always thought it was strange the Scottish Parliament or the Scottish government desperately wanting more tax raising powers because people don't like paying tax. So if they were to devolve,
I don't mind other people paying tax. It's not them.
Yeah, exactly. People like spending money, not having to.
I support you
give
paying more
more
tax
money.
than you, but not me.
People want the rich to pay more tax, and the rich is anyone with more money than them. So that it's giving or making the Scottish government take more responsibility for raising tax might not necessarily be something that the Scottish government would want to take on. If you're going to say,
the most disastrous policy for Scotland.
You need to take more responsibility for the money that you're
Oh,
raising
yeah.
and spending. That could be quite damaging for the
Fiscal
SNP
autonomy
long
would
term.
be a disaster in devolved context. If we had to basically raise every penny, it could be a massive black hole.
Yeah. So I don't think Andy Burnham wants to punish Scotland. I think he genuinely does want to see more. He wants to build up the economies in the north of the UK, Scotland, and the north of England. I don't think he's so any kind of Machiavellian ulterior motive with that stuff. But making the Scottish government take responsibility for the taxes it raises more than just giving them a block grant. It could be a poison chalice.
All right, let's move on. Yes, Scotland. So just a quick summary. Peter Murrell, former SNP chief executive, jailed last month for stealing over 400 grand of SNP funds when he was chief executive. The spotlight has now shifted to Yes Scotland, which was the main campaign body for independence during the referendum. Sunday Mail has published a couple of stories, basically to the effect that there are concerns about how money was spent or raised by Yes Scotland, which was heavily linked to the SNP and Murrell during the referendum. Just want to give us a summary of where we are and why the story is important.
So the basic facts of the matter here are that former quite senior people within the SNP. A guy who was a branch secretary has made a complaint to the police over the Yes Scotland accounts. Yes, as you explained, Yes Scotland was the sort of independence supporting campaigning organisation that was set up before the referendum. David Henry has made a complaint to the police over the accounts and what he believes to be unaccounted for money within that organisation. The police appear to be taking this seriously enough to, issue him with a reference number and come out and take statements from him. And that's the story that's been reported thus far. I think you would be loath to ignore any story like that, given the recent history of SNP accounts. The other side of this is that there is no question the SNP was heavily involved in Yes Scotland. They had a number of people on its advisory board. One of the Yes Scotland directors was a very senior person within the SNP, and the story we ran at the weekend was about the claims that Peter Murrell had was played a very significant role within Yes Scotland in terms of determining how funds were released. What do we know about Peter Murrell? We know that he is an enormous fraudster and thief, and that generally, the place that he carried out his frauds were to do with the accounts of the political organisations that he was running. So it feels to me like a legitimate story to look at what was Peter Murrell's involvement in this organisation, and was there possibly anything untoward happening with Yes Scotland's accounts. I think you would be a fool to disregard the possibility that there could be issues there. Now we'll see what will happen with this police investigation. Nobody knows. Think back to the investigation of the SNP account. It took many years. This investigation could be over very quickly or not. I think it's just one that we really need to wait and see and not jump to any conclusions on.
Yeah, I was at the press conference yesterday outside of the Fetties police station in Edinburgh, where David Henry and the legendary Sean Clarkin both gave an interview to the cops, handed over various documents, and then they took questions from the press afterwards. I thought, in terms of that press conference rather than the sterling journalism of the Sunday Mail, I thought in terms of the allegations at the press conference, it was a bit etch-a-sketch, but I wouldn't underestimate Sean Clarkin at all. I mean, he was the guy that put in the original complaint over SNP finances that led to Peter Murrell being jailed. So, given that there were such close links between the SNP and Yes Scotland, given that Murrell effectively ran the SNP at that time, I think these questions are legitimate.
Yeah, like you say, underestimate Sean Clarkin at your peril. Those of us old enough will remember chasing Ian Gray into a sandwich shop during an election campaign and pretty much torpedoing his...
He's got a new enemy now.
Yeah.
He used to be Labour, now it's the SNP.
Yeah, I think that you need to not jump to conclusions with these things. It might turn out that the police will decide very quickly that there's nothing to these claims, but maybe not.
Doug, where do you see it going?
Yeah, I mean, John's right. We would be foolhardy. I think it's very easy to be like, this is just some embittered former member or something like that. But I said the same thing about branch form. If you'd asked me 4 years ago, is anything going to become an Operation Branch Form? I said, nah, no chance. There's nothing there. And yet, here we are now. I mean, the thing I find most fascinating about it is the SNP's claim that they were completely separate from Yes Scotland and nothing to do with Yes Scotland. Why then was Alex Salmond front and centre at the launch of Yes Scotland? And why was Peter Murrell getting pay rises for people working at Yes Scotland? People who've been at Yes Scotland HQ during the referendum campaign tell me it was pretty much an SNP office. It was full of SNP spads, SNP advisors. They obviously were controlling it. I mean, the best bit of this story is we had it in on Thursday is Del Boy Murrow turning up in his big truck with his Yes branded merchandise to sell instead of the actual Yes branded merchandise.
Yeah.
I mean, where did that money go? I've got images of him turning up in his Robin Reliant with his bonnet and his sheepskin on, and he's like a Cockney trader.
At the end of the day,
punting
there
all
was
this
loads of
gear.
money sloshing about these
Yeah,
organisations, and what we know now is that Peter Murrow was a massive fraudster. So, like,
What I would say about Anne Widdecombe is that she was, I think, a member of John Major's government. In terms of her political views, she was well on the right, but she was always someone, if I was on the sofa and the news was on and it was turned down and I saw her on the news, I would always turn it up because I always found her quite an interesting character, very principled politician. I mean, I think it was the late 90s, she really stood up to her former boss, Michael Howard, who had been Home Secretary, and they clashed over some prison governor's row, and the way she kind of held him accountable was very, very impressive.
I mean, the 90s, in terms of my political knowledge, is a wee bit before my time. I was too busy partying through that kind of era. But from what I can gather, Anne Widdecombe was someone who stuck to her principles, but always respected others and never held it against anyone. She didn't kind of mix your political views with your personal views or your personality. And I really think that's something we could do with more of in this country right now, because right now, if you see it online, it's toxic, the debate, and it's all based on someone's political view, and you're turning around and saying, you hate people you've never met because they disagree with something you said on Twitter. And I think we could all learn a lesson from that. She was obviously a deeply religious person as well, but from what I can gather, she tried not to let that influence her too much in her politics. I'm also a wee bit wary of politicians who are deeply religious, because you're never really sure what's kind of driving them. But she was someone who seemed to be driven by her conviction. And I mean, obviously what happened to her, regardless, is just, I mean, the whole thing's been unbelievable in some ways. It's just, ever since it's been kind of dripping out, when we heard she died, and she was 78-year-old woman, that can happen. It can happen suddenly, but and then it comes out that it was being treated as murder, and you kind of thought,
and the story shifted, doesn't it?
And it's become counter-terrorism involved and whatnot, and it's just absolutely, and it's just a sad tale. And yeah, I think she's from an era where politicians were just a bit better than they are right now.
I think it's obviously going to reignite the debate on the security of political figures, given that we've had, MPs murdered over the last 10, 12 years. It's just, do we give politicians enough protection?
Yeah, I mean, I would say Anne Widdecombe was a kind of Christian conservative, I think would be the best way of describing her politics. And as you say, she was always worth listening to, even if you didn't necessarily agree with the things she was saying. And it does seem incredibly sad that we're now in a political environment where, people are being murdered potentially. And I know that this is still not been conclusively, we don't know exactly what the killer's motivation was, but it certainly looks like initially it was reported that it wasn't political. Now we've got counter-terrorism detectives in charge of the case, and it does look like that initial theory was, I don't really understand why Devon and Cornwall police come out so quickly to say that it definitely wasn't a politically motivated attack.
Did they say it definitely wasn't?
They said there was no evidence at this stage. It just seemed like a very strange, why not just say we don't know what the motivation for this was at this point? It sounded like they were reacting to other reform politicians
tinderbox right now,
saying that it was politically motivated. I mean, it's really sad. Hopefully, it will make people reflect on just how wise it is to jump to calling people Nazis and fascists, and on the other side calling people traitors, and all of this really incendiary language that seems to be the norm now in politics. You know, it'd be good if we could just get back to trying to have a well-reasoned debate.
I think she was a big beast politician from the era of big beasts, and I'm not sure in 20 years' time we'll be looking at many of the modern day politicians as big beasts. It just feels like that kind of era. Love them or loathe them, people like Blair and Brown and you know, maybe to a lesser extent Boris Johnson, you know, people like that who were seen as big personalities and people that could, you know, are really part of the fabric of society almost. And now it just feels like I just think the quality's so poor now compared to what it was even 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And I mean, maybe Andy Burnham's going to kind of turn that around, but it just feels like another.
Seems like it's hard to, in this sort of fevered era of social media, where you know you can have your say. You're not restricted to writing a letter to a newspaper where everyone's got a microphone or a megaphone, and they're not slow to air their opinion. It just feels like politics has changed forever, probably for the worse.
Yeah, I mean, I probably think society's changed for the worse because of that, but that's a whole other debate for another time.
Well, indeed, hope justice is served very quickly in this case. So, listen, thanks very much to John and to Doug for joining me. Thanks also to Darryl from the Daily Record video team who produced this episode. You can listen to Planet Holyrood on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or watch it on the Record YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok for the latest news and the best bits of the podcast.
We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.